What is up, guys? If you're new here, my name is Jennifer. I'm a full-time data analyst and a full-time IT baddie. On this page, we do all things tech related, from vlogs, information, plugs, networking, you name it. So if you like what you hear and see, don't forget to subscribe, do all the nice things as we get into today's lesson. So, guys, I got asked an interesting question, which I think is going to be very beneficial, especially for people who have not been in the data space in general. And that is, how do you make the data tell a story? In as much as that question is so simple, it is very important that when you look at your data, you're able to tell a story from it. Because if you can't tell a story from your data, then basically the visualizations that you want to give stakeholders is absolutely useless. So step one, I would firstly ask myself, before anything else, why can't you tell a story with this data that you've had? Because sometimes it really could be that you open a data set and it could be in a completely different format, which is unreadable, like a CSV, like a text file, something very obscure. It could be that there's missing columns are not named correctly, missing values, and all of that. You need to determine what is keeping you from actually telling a story with the data. And if you can, if possible, you have to make sure that the data quality is superb. Let me tell you something, that when you become a data analyst or even an analytics engineer or something in data similar to what I am, you're gonna find out that having quality data is what's going to help you give your stakeholders the best decisions possible. Because if the data is not quality, if there's missing values, if it's in the wrong format, you cannot make visualizations based off of incorrect, incomplete, or low quality data. And remember, for your CV specifically, if the data that you have gotten is just so bad that you can't use it, it's okay to get like another data set for your CV projects, because you don't want to use data that you can't even tell a story with. Because in the real working world, if the data is so unusable that it can't be used in visualizations or reports, sometimes we will actually revert until we get good quality data. So now step two, before you even start making graphs, is to always try and summarize your data, because a lot of people go ahead and clean the data and then randomly try to make graphs, and those graphs don't mean anything. But what you want to do first, after you've cleaned the data and found some good quality data, is to make sure that you use something that we call descriptive statistics, which is applicable in data analysis and data science, to actually see what patterns you can find from the data. You have to look at how many rows are there, which categories are coming up a lot, what categories are you seeing? Are there any trends? For example, what's the minimum, maximum? What's the average? Those kind of statistics is what you're going to be able to translate into graphs that are going to be very useful for your stakeholders. It might seem very basic, but trust me, when you try and look at those trends first by summarizing the data before you choose the correct graphs to summarize it again for stakeholders, it is very imperative that you learn that skill, because it's going to help you bring stories from your data. Step three is kind of like building on from step two, but especially if you're using Excel or Google Sheets. One thing that I love doing before making graphs is to always use pivot tables to summarize my data, because you can easily see trends using pivot tables. Because with pivot tables, you're able to remove duplicate rows or rows that appear more than once that could distort results. You can see those totals, those categories that come up real often. You can do sums, averages, and all of that. I love pivot tables because they're able to summarize data very well. And that's also the reason why I always emphasize that Excel or Google Sheets is such an important tool for you to use, because guess what? Your stakeholders are going to be using those pivot tables sometimes to summarize data and then get back to you and say, give me a good graph so that I can make it on Power BI or something like that. So it's always important that while you're summarizing data, you use pivot tables and get used to using pivot tables to help you summarize before you move on to making graphs, especially if you're using Excel and Google Sheets. And to be honest, once you've gotten to the pivot table part and you've seen summaries that actually give you real results, like the totals, the averages, the max, the min that I was telling you about, then you can actually make proper graphs. Because those graphs, whether you use pie charts or bar graphs or column graphs, now you'll be able to tell a proper story which will show you proper trends that you'll be able to present to stakeholders. I know that it may sound like a basic thing, but a lot of these steps that I'm giving you is going to be something that you're going to have to use daily in your job as a data analyst. So it's so important that you learn to get a story out of the data, but not just to get the data and then straight jump into graphs. Because, like I mentioned in my previous video, it's not all about making pretty graphs, it's about you telling your stakeholders what they need to do with this data that you've given them in summation in terms of graphs and maybe pivot tables sometimes. And I think that is where I'm going to leave this lesson for today, guys. And remember, don't forget that your homework is to like, subscribe, share, and do all of the nice things as I come back with another lesson.